Welcome to the Selling from the Heart podcast on the Salescast Network. You've joined a global movement of sales professionals who are dedicated to being authentic and building trust. We call it Selling from the Heart. Together, we are on a mission to bring sincerity and substance to the sales profession we all love. Get ready to be inspired and equipped as we join our hosts, Larry Levine and Darrell Amy.
Are you ready to take your career to the next level?
One of the best ways we found to do that is to surround yourself with like-hearted sales professionals.
And we've heard that saying, you're the sum of the people that you hang out with.
Well, if you want to hang out with some sales professionals that also want to take their career to the next level and believe in selling from the heart, we invite you to join us in the Selling from the Heart Insiders Group.
This is a weekly gathering of like-hearted, like-minded sales professionals and sales leaders. We truly build community each and every week.
One of our favorite things is they're up close and personal with thought leaders, former podcast guests, and people that challenge us to grow in sales. We would like you to join us for our next up close and personal. Just go to sellingfromtheheart.net/free-pass. That's sellingfromtheheart.net/free-pass. And we look forward to seeing you in the Selling from the Heart Insiders Group. Hello, and welcome back to the Selling from the Heart podcast. Your co-host, Darrell Amy, here today with Larry Levine. What's going on, Larry?
Oh, we have so much going on. I remember this was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. We were kicking off a podcast, and I go, man, I can't believe summer's just about here. And now here we are. We're knocking on fall. We're going to hit the fourth quarter. Where is this time going? I have no clue.
It's fun. It's the fall. Q4 is right here. You're dialed in. Our commitment is to keep you focused and fired up through the end of this year. So make sure to like and subscribe. And we are celebrating a birthday. Happy birthday to Selling from the Heart, Larry. 5 years. The celebration's this week on the 19th. Check the social feeds for details of how you can get involved. But this is so exciting. 5 years, Selling from the Heart book out there now, available at Barnes & Noble. And it's just so fun watching this movement of authenticity grow. And congratulations to you, Larry. Happy birthday. And also thank you to everybody who has been a part of this movement. That in year 6 is about to start, Larry, and this is going to be a blast.
I can't believe I'm 5 years old. I wish I was 5 years old sometimes. I appreciate it. This doesn't happen without the community. And that's what we set out to do when we started the podcast 6.5 years ago that turned into the book. It was to build a community around being authentic, being genuine. A lot of times you hear us at Selling from the Heart to say it's about giving a rip. We give a rip about everybody. We want to elevate the profession into what it needs to become. And that's a trustworthy profession that makes a difference.
Absolutely. And part of being trustworthy is being consistent. And that's why I'm so excited about our guest today that is back in the studio, ready to come on. Weldon Long is a successful entrepreneur, sales expert, and he's the author of the New York Times Bestseller, The Power of Consistency: Prosperity Mindset Training for Sales and Business Professionals. Weldon is one of the nation's most powerful speakers and a driven motivator who teaches the sales and prosperity mindset philosophies that catapulted him from desperation and poverty to a life of wealth and prosperity. And he's here with us today. Welcome, Weldon, to the Selling from the Heart studios. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here, gentlemen. Congratulations on your 5th birthday.
I know. Isn't it wonderful? It's like,
that's awesome.
Now I guess I have to wear a party hat, Weldon, huh?
Always important to bring your party hats with you. Never mind.
We can get Larry to stop acting like a 5-year-old. Well, Weldon, we're glad you're here. And you know the question that every guest on the Selling from the Heart podcast answers. Yep. And that is, Weldon, what does it mean to you to sell from the heart?
It's a great question. It's something I've been talking about for decades now. And what I always tell my sales team and sales teams that I'm training or coaching is that really successful sales is about extending ourselves emotionally and professionally to our prospects, whether or not we get the business. And I think that's super important because, some people in sales tend to be A-type personalities, show me the baby, let's get it done. And a lot of salespeople will kind of probe and pry and try to determine first if they have a good shot at earning the business. And then if they think they do, then they're going to put their heart into it. And my philosophy is you have to be willing to extend yourself 100% emotionally, professionally, whether or not you're going to get the business. And that to me is the essence of selling from the heart and really selling with integrity. You mentioned trust and how important that is. It's such an important factor of it, but you got to be willing to extend yourself and get in there and get a little bit messy. I tell people relationships are messy by definition, but you got to get in there and build that relationship. And that requires extending yourself emotionally and professionally.
Oh, and I applaud what you just said, Weldon, because it's a delicate balance of head and heart. And we have to balance both of those. And I'm so glad you brought integrity into this, because we're all about this. And sometimes I think salespeople leave integrity at the door because they forget about it. I think deep down inside they know, but they get caught up in the moment. When they get caught up in the moment, then all of a sudden they lead with their head and they forget about the heart.
Yeah. It's funny when I'm dealing with any of my salespeople, and they call me or we're at a meeting and they didn't get a job, they didn't get the close, they didn't get the deal. I've always felt that the sales numbers are really important. What gets measured gets done, all that kind of stuff. We have to track sales performance, but sales performance doesn't tell me the whole story. It doesn't tell me a man's character or a woman's character. It doesn't show that, because the reality is you can go in on a sales call and do a beautiful job and still not get the deal. Other times you can go into a half-assed job and walk out with the deal. So the result does not tell the whole story. When I ask my salespeople, if they walk out of a call, did they extend themselves emotionally and professionally? Did they serve their customer to their very best ability? And did they walk out with their self-respect and dignity? And if they answer yes to those three questions, I don't even have to ask them if they got the deal, because that particular deal is irrelevant to me. Because I know if they do that in every call, the numbers are going to work over time.
Powerful. That one, Larry, is a writer-downer. Everyone hit the rewind button on that.
It's already been written down in one of my books.
Well, yeah, you might want to get one of those. But, there's a backstory here, and you didn't start out in this place, and you've got quite a dramatic story from very challenging places to being extremely successful and now guiding other people to success. Weldon, I would love it if you could share a little bit of your story with our audience to give some context here today.
Absolutely. My life looks pretty good today with my writing, my speaking, my businesses. But 20 years ago, January of 2003, I was living in a homeless shelter. And I was living in that homeless shelter because I had just been released from prison after serving 13 out of 16 years. I was a high school dropout in the 9th grade, started running the streets as a teenager. At 23 years old, I went to prison for pulling a gun on a guy. Did about 4.5 years, got out, hooked up with some guys I met in the joint, back in prison 18 months later for about 2 years on gun charges, got out a second time, and within 2 years was back in again on federal money laundering charges related to some illegal telemarketing I was doing. And so from 1987 to 2003, that roughly 16, 17-year period, I spent 13 of those years walking prison yards. And it was that last trip to prison in federal prison in 1996 when my father passed away. And that was my come to Jesus moment with myself. That was my moment of clarity, my epiphany, if you will. And I made a decision, this is a long story short, but made a decision to change the course of my life, to become a man my father could have been proud of. At the time, I had a 3-year-old son that I had fathered when I was out on parole, made a decision to be the father he deserved. And those two decisions and the work in the ensuing 7 years while I was still in prison, because I had 7 years left to go, I made a decision to read books and find out what really successful people do in business and in sales, and started to do that instead of the things I had been doing. And that's where the change began. 7 years later, I walked out. That was January of 2003 to a homeless shelter here in Colorado Springs, got a job selling air conditioners, got really good at that, opened my own company, grew that to 20 million and sold it, started writing books. And that's what I've been doing the last 15 years, is writing books and speaking and coaching, that type of thing.
Wow. I applaud you for sharing parts of your story. And I'm a firm believer in this, that you really don't know somebody until you know their backstory. So thank you for sharing some of that. Yeah. And Darrell and I are both avid book readers, and there's books throughout the years that have impacted my life. If you could go back to that moment where you started to reading and you started reflecting and gaining clarity, what was the book that you read that just was the aha that may have just slapped you across the face and go, okay, I'm starting to get it?
Yeah. I tell people I started with the Bible and I went through Tony Robbins and everything in between. But the one that really was the seminal book that started everything, my father died on June 10th of 1996. And I was in federal prison. I spent a few hours crying and just, inconsolable really, because the realization of my life hit me when he died, like what I had done. And the first thing that went through my head when he died, and when I learned that he died, was that Dad went to his grave with me in prison again. And that was a really, really difficult thing. So I'd made that decision to start reading. That was my first decision. So I walked out of my cell and I walked down to the end of the cell house, and there was a little broom closet, kind of a mop closet thing in there. And there was a cardboard box of books that the cops would throw books in, just kind of donate them. And I start rifling through that box because I'm desperate for something. And I come across a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I thought to myself, damn, if I could just get 1 or 2 of those. So I took that book back to my cell and I read it cover to cover. I read it a second time. And that book, I don't say it changed my life, it saved my life. And I think part of the reason it was so impactful on me, obviously the lessons, which are universal and timeless. Dr. Covey, many years later, became a very close friend and a mentor. But at the time, I was just some guy sitting in a prison cell. But in the introduction of that book, Dr. Covey says that you have the ability to live out of your imagination rather than your past. And that was a big, big one for me. At 32 years old, my past was violence and prison and poverty and struggle. And I had kind of reached a point in my life where like, this is kind of how it's going to be. You know, I'm in my early 30s. So it's, you know, it's not like I'm a teenager or anything. And when I read that and I decided to believe that I could live out of my imagination. And that was kind of the genesis. And I began to read so many other books about the mindset, you know, the classic stuff, Tony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, Viktor Frankl, all that stuff. I just began to consume all that stuff. Then I started reading sales books. Tom Hopkins, who actually has endorsed a couple of my books. I think he wrote the foreword. Yeah, he did write the foreword to Power of Consistency.
Love it.
So I've been able to connect with many of the role models and the heroes that kind of got me through that and taught me how to live a better life personally and how to make money professionally.
Love it. Love it. And I think this is, you know, the point I see here is so powerful. You didn't wait till you got out of prison to start learning. You said, I'm in this place right now. I'm stuck here and I'm going to take this moment, this season of my life, and I'm going to grow. And I think for all of our listeners, you know, anyone that feels stuck, this is the time. Right. I love that. I love that. The power of consistency. Give us some insight into your heart behind this book. I know everyone listening in is going to want to click the link in the show notes and grab a copy. The power of consistency. What's how did that originate?
Yeah. So as I began the process of reading, I came across the famous Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that we become what we think about all day long. And when I first read that, I was still very skeptical and cynical, and I thought it was just nonsense. Like, why would my thoughts, you know, control my life? A little later on, I came across a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche said, we attract that which we fear. In the Bible, Job says, Father, that which I have feared has come upon me. Viktor Frankl says in his book, fear may come true. And so I started reading all this stuff. It's like, that's a clue, you know? And so I started kind of examining the process, like what's in here? What are my greatest fears? And my greatest fears, this was in 1996, was living and dying in prison, never being a father to my son, being broke, homeless, loser, convict the rest of my life. And all of a sudden it occurred to me like, wow, that looks exactly like my life. Somehow the insanity in here was getting out of my life. So I sat down at the little metal desk in my cell at 32 years old, and I wrote out what a perfect life for me would look like. Wow. The first thing I wrote down is I'm an awesome father to my son. I have a beautiful wife I can love and trust. I'm wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I have a beautiful home in Maui. I'm a man of honor, character, and integrity. And none of those things were even remotely true at the time. Right. And, but I began the process, what I later learned, the neural conditioning, kind of recreating habitual thoughts, you know, with the neural pathways and growing new neural pathways and new habitual behaviors and thoughts. And the power of consistency comes down to that success in life. It's not about the big things we do. It's about the little things that we do consistently. You know, it's that old saying that Jim Rohn said, that excellence and success is about doing the ordinary things extraordinarily well. So what I finally figured out through my studies and my learning is to get clarity on what I wanted. And instead of working on 100 different things to get there, to pick out the 1 or 2 most important, right? The old Pareto principle, 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. So I said, okay, I want this. I want to be a great dad. What's the little things I can do right now that would help me be a better dad? Obviously, I wasn't going to be with my son till he was 10 years old. He was 3 when this started. But I could start writing letters. So I wrote my son letters, hundreds of letters over the following 7 years. And I started looking at my life. And part of this, it's funny, I was in the library at this federal prison I was in. This was a couple of years later. And the old Tony Robbins Personal Power 30-day program on cassettes they had in there.
Nice.
And you could rent them out. You could check them out and put some headphones on. And the thing that Robbins says in that is at the end of every lesson, go take some action today towards what we just talked about. Mm-hmm. And those actions for me were very limited. Typically it was reading a book or maybe meditating or maybe exercising, something that I could control and that I could actually do that was, symbolic of moving ahead in that direction. And what I figured is that if you just focus the one or two things that you got to do every single day to be successful and just focus on those, everything else will fall into place. Because if you got 100 things you got to do, the confused mind says no. I get overwhelmed, right? So with sales, for example, when I'm teaching sales, I've identified 3 things that I think if we did every single call would be all we had to do. Number 1, run every call with passion and purpose. Right. And all that entails, right? Passion and purpose is commitment, it's focus, it's transparency, it's integrity. It's all the things that you guys talk about all the time, right? Become a boss at diagnosing problems and recommend solutions, right? You got to be the very best person at uncovering problems and challenges from your prospect and crafting solutions for that. And then number 3 is ask for the damn order every time. Ask for the order every time. My signature ask is always, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, will you trust me with this recommendation? That's my first ask every time. They never say yes on the first time, but it's always my first. And so I think the power of consistency is executing on the small things on a consistent basis. It's not about the scope of what we do. It's about the consistency with which we do them.
This Darrell, this is so good. And I'm a simple guy. And I remember, I just have, there's a long story to that. We can't get in the podcast, but my mother-in-law, as I'm listening to this, is chirping in my ear because she always would tell me this: if you can't do the little things correctly, you'll never be able to do the big things correctly. Yeah. And this ties so much into sales is if we can't do these simple little things correctly in sales, the bigger things are never going to come to fruition. Never.
Yeah.
Larry, what you say about being a simple guy, I'm the same way. And I tell people that the ideas in my books are very simple. I tell people they're very easy to read. They were, after all, written by a 9th grader. So it's so funny when the power of consistency came out, when this book came out, it hit number 5 on the New York Times list and number 2 on Wall Street Journal. And I got a call from a guy named Ed Nottingham, who is a neuroscientist, a clinical psychologist guy, that works for FedEx and coaches all this stuff for FedEx all around the world. And he made an appointment. We got on the phone. He says, Mr. Long, I got to tell you something. This explanation that you give in this book is the simplest explanation between the neuroscience of decision-making and the fundamental principles of rational emotive behavior therapy I've ever read in my life. And I'm like, there's a name for this shit? Are you kidding me? It's common freaking sense, right? Remember your mother said, be careful what you wish for? That pretty much sums up my entire book. I mean, save the $20.
That is hilarious.
Well, this is a fantastic conversation. I'm looking forward after the break to diving more into the sales and prosperity mindset. And right now, every week, as you know, we hear from someone in the Selling from the Heart community. And one of our biggest friends and fans, and someone we're a huge fan of as well, is Mark Hunter. And Mark shares what it means to him to sell from the heart. So we'll hear from Mark after a brief word from our sponsors and then rejoin this great conversation.
I'm thrilled to introduce to you a revolutionary tool that will change the way you understand yourself and others. Our partners at the Y Institute have created the Y.OS Discovery Platform, a powerful tool that in just 10 minutes can help you uncover your core motivations, how you bring them to life, and what others can expect from you. This is more than just a self-awareness tool. It's a game changer for coaches and those who want to help their clients reach their full potential. If you're a coach or a sales leader, go to yinstitute.com and look for the Y certification. We'll put the link in the show notes. When you reach out to the Y Institute, let them know you heard about it on Selling from the Heart, and you'll be on your way to helping your people discover what drives them. Don't just take our word for it. Go to yinstitute.com and see the powerful impact the Y.OS discovery can have on your life.
What does it mean to be selling from the heart? It means to be who you are and to put the other person first. I think, I've always had this belief, being passionate about people. I know the two of you are.
That's always, I always love hearing Mark. Mark, huge shout out to you. And if you want to be in a future episode of Selling from the Heart, just text the word video to 21,000. That's video to 21,000. And you'll see how easy it is to share your answer to the famous question we ask around here, where we're having a phenomenal conversation right now with Weldon Long, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Power of Consistency, the prosperity mindset. Weldon, what is the prosperity mindset? Where does this all begin?
Yeah, well, that kind of refers more or less to the reality that our expectations pretty much set the limit on our achievements, right? We never accidentally do more than we expected. And what I always say is that, expectations are the ceiling on what you do, but your imagination, sets the ceiling on expectations. You got to dream big. It's really, really important. And the reason for that, there's a little part of our brain, our subconscious brain, called the reticular activating system, and it's a filter, and it decides what you notice and what you don't notice. So scientists estimate that at any given moment, there's 6 million bits of information we could potentially process, sights and shapes and sounds and movements and smells and all these different things around us, right? 6 million of them. And of course, the conscious brain can't focus on 6 million things at one time. So the reticular activating system's job is to decide what's important. It's the filter. What's important for me to pay attention to and what can I ignore? And as an example that I use, if you're on a beautiful mountain stroll with your spouse and you're enjoying the beautiful flowers and the trees and the valleys and the river and the birds, and it's just this magnificent moment you're having, and then all of a sudden a mountain lion jumps out in the middle of the trail, right? Do you notice the smell of the flowers anymore? Do you notice the babbling brook? Do you notice the beautiful trees? No, the only thing that matters, the reticular activating system filters all that stuff out and helps you focus on the only thing that matters, which of course is outrunning your wife. Only kidding. But it forces you to deal with that threat because the reticular activating system job is to keep you alive, right? So the example I'll use for people is I'll often say, if you expect, your expectation is to make $100,000 a year, right? You'll notice every opportunity that will help you achieve that. But if a $500,000 opportunity comes by, guess what the reticular activating system does? If your expectation is 100,000, it will filter it out as irrelevant, right? So I'll ask audiences all the time, how many in this audience, if they lost their job today, within 24 to 48 hours, could get another job making within 10% plus or minus of what you're making today? And every hand goes up. And I'll say, you know why that is? It's because your reticular activating system has been paying attention to every opportunity, overhearing every conversation, reading every article that comes in your focus, because it's always trying to stay a step ahead, right? But what if I said the next 48 hours, you had to go have a job making 5 times what you're making today? How much harder would that be? How many could do that? No hands go up. You know why? Because your subconscious has not been working on ways to make $500,000. It's been working on ways to make 100,000. So my point is, you have to dream big and make big things possible, big things within your expectation. The goals, sales goals, income goals, whatever, like they should scare us a little bit, right? They shouldn't be that big, because what happens, that sets the subconscious mind in motion that will start finding the answers to these things we want to do. I'll give you a quick story. This will blow your mind. As I've gotten older, I've really got into exotic cars. And in 2018, I was on YouTube and I came across a video of Floyd Mayweather, the boxer, doing a video on this brand new G-Wagon that he got after a fight. And it was called a G550 squared. They only made about 1,000 of them in 27 and 2018. They're 7 feet tall, 7 feet wide. They're just monster trucks, basically. I'm like, that's the coolest truck I've ever seen in my life. So I take a snap picture of it. I put it on a little dream board, which is just designed to keep bombarding my subconscious mind with things that I want. That was in 2018. A couple of months later, I'm talking to a car guy. And I said, hey, you ever come across one of these G-Wagon squares? He goes, yeah, they're kind of hard to get. And I said, well, if you ever find one, just give me a call. I'd be interested. 2 years goes by, right? And that first summer of COVID, 2020, he calls me up. He says, dude, I've got a G-Wagon squared exactly like the picture. I sent him that picture on my dream board. Exactly like it. It's been part of the collection, 10,000 miles on it. We do the deal. I go out to San Diego, La Jolla, and I drive it back to Colorado, and I have the car. 2 weeks later, I'm here at my desk. At this desk, my wife comes down with the mail. And she goes, here's the mail. She goes, here's the title work for the G-Wagon. I said, great, just put it right there. She goes, no, you'll never believe who the former owner was. Floyd Mayweather Productions, Las Vegas, Nevada. It wasn't one just like his. It was the exact same one that I ended up buying through a broker out of his collection. It's insane. But that's the power of the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is 10,000 times more powerful than the conscious brain, right? And it will solve any problem. It's the most powerful supercomputing problem solver ever. If you ever had a situation where you can't solve something, you can't figure something out, a math problem or a financial problem, relationship problem, and then you wake up at 2:00 in the morning and the answer comes to you, it's because the subconscious mind never stopped trying to figure it out. The key is we got to give it the right instructions to make sure it's going out and looking at the right things. And that's why I have what I call a prosperity plan, which is a central component of the prosperity mindset. Your life has to be outlined in a simple format that you can review on a daily basis to condition the subconscious to go out and find those things.
Oh, wow. This is so powerful, because one of my favorite sayings, Weldon, is this: the stories in our mind become the stories of our lives.
Amen.
And it's just what kind of stories you're telling yourself. And Darrell knows me real well. I'm going to hold my hand up on this. Sometimes they're not the greatest stories in the world I tell myself in my head. Right. However, I'm just going to throw a stake on this one. This is why I believe that salespeople today should be reading. And I'm gonna say it, not so many sales books as much as mindset books. Absolutely. And inspiration books. I'm not discrediting sales books, none whatsoever. They're phenomenal. But if you can go back in the archives and start reading all the things from the past around the things that Weldon's been sharing and all the greats that made them what they are, it's all going to be around mindset and prosperity and seeing things that they thought they could never achieve, but they did achieve. It's all mindset work.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I'm not knocking the sales books either, because I've written
here.
But I agree with you. I would take a mediocre process salesperson with a great mindset than the top performer with a nasty negative mindset, because it's just, you got to have the right mindset. It's part and parcel of all success.
I'm curious. This is something we talk about a lot at Selling from the Heart. How do you start your day? What does the morning routine look like for Weldon?
Yep. I call it a quiet time ritual. It's a very simple process. It lasts about 15 minutes. And in my books, I talk about a prosperity plan, which is writing out, what do I want? What are 2 or 3 things I got to do every day to get it? What's the next thing I want? What are 2 or 3 things? And I recommend having 2 financial objectives, 2 relationship objectives, and 2 health objectives. That could be mental, spiritual, or physical health. So there's 6 priorities of my life that I'm working on at any time. And underneath each priority is 1 or 2, maybe 3 things that I have to do every single day. So what I do, I will come down here. My wife and I typically will have coffee and chat for about 30 minutes. Then I come to my desk and I pull out my prosperity plan. And it begins with just inspirational, motivational things that I've written down and collected over the years. And then I go into the things I want to accomplish, right? I'm an awesome husband to Taryn. Here's 1 or 2 things I got to do. I earn X amount of dollars. Here's 1 or 2 things every day I got to do. I'm a fantastic father to Hunter and Skylar. Here's the things I got to do, right? I'm a great leader. And so I simplify it to where there's 6 things I'm working on and 1 or 2 behaviors under each one that will get me there. And so I review it for 10 or 15 minutes, what I call the quiet time ritual, visualizing, accomplishing those things, visualize myself doing those things. And what happens when you engage in that process is it leverages something called cognitive dissonance. It's a big driver of human behavior. So for example, let's say in my prosperity plan, I say I weigh 200 pounds. I eat only healthy and nutritious foods. I exercise 5 days per week. And then at lunch, I find myself with a double cheeseburger going down the gullet. What's going to happen is I start feeling dissonance. Why? Because I told myself this morning, I eat only healthy and nutritious foods. And so when you start acting in a manner that's inconsistent with what you're telling yourself, it creates internal anxiety that we call dissonance. And dissonance drives behaviors. So 1 of 2 things has to happen. Either A, I got to stop eating the cheeseburgers, or I'm going to live in this constant state of anxiety, which the human body hates, right? We want to get back to a centered, calm place, right? But the other, and if I stop eating the hamburgers, I start feeling better, right? Because now I'm doing what I said. But here's the other thing. There's another way to get rid of dissonance, and that is to never make a commitment to yourself that you're doing something. Because then you don't do it, you feel fine because you never made any commitments to yourself otherwise. It's the ultimate and personal accountability. It's not about your family. It's not about your wife, your boss. It's about what you've decided you want and what you need to do every single day. And if you review that, something as simple as I make 10 cold calls every day. I earn $300,000 a year. And you visualize yourself making those 10 cold calls and then go to work and not do it one day. And you'll feel like a fish out of water on your way home because you know you didn't do it. And so what happens the next day? Well, dang, that didn't feel so good. I better get off my ass and get on the phone today and make those 10 calls. Or I just tear up the plan, let myself off the hook, which of course is going to change nothing. It'll make you feel better, but you'll still be broke.
You know what I like about this? It's the consistency part of this is I applaud your morning routine. I have a morning routine. I know Darrell does. And there's sometimes I'll try to throw myself out of whack just to see how I feel. Like I won't do part of this just to see what happens. And it goes back to what you just said. I start gaining anxiety because I'm used to this routine.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be a long routine. I mean, mine's 30 to 45 minutes, but it's the same thing. But it's just how I start my day determines what happens next. If I started off on a wrong foot, I just know it just goes down the tubes really quick.
Right.
Wow, what a great conversation. Weldon, I know everyone listening in is thinking, how can I get more Weldon Long in my life? So what are some suggestions for some great next steps?
Well, the easiest way is to go to my website, weldonlong.com. If you're interested in the books, my first 2 books are there on audio, also hardcover and softcover, of course. My first book, by the way, was a book called The Upside of Fear, which I wrote that book myself, self-published it, and it was Writer's Digest Best Autobiography of the Year it came out in 2009 or 2010. It was crazy, dude. That's kind of what got me on the writing thing. But that's the story of my life. And then the power of consistency you mentioned, and the follow-up to that was consistency selling. But the easiest way is the website, or just hop on Amazon if you're interested in the books. If you're looking for more, coaching and different things, weldonlong.com is the best place to go.
Fantastic. What an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing not only your time, but your heart with our community. And we're cheering you on. This is fantastic, Weldon. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate it, gentlemen. A lot of fun.
Awesome.
It's our pleasure.
Awesome. Larry, wow. What an incredible conversation, and so many things to unpack from this. This is one of the episodes I think you're going to want to rewind and write some stuff down, and definitely take this into some further reflection. And this mindset of prosperity, this mindset, and the cognitive dissonance that we were talking about at the end. I think this is extremely, extremely powerful.
No, it is. And you've often heard me say this, that what's forever old is forever new. And you'll be amazed what you can learn from so many of the greats of years past. Mm-hmm. Whether that be Napoleon Hill, if we fast track even, to the more present, whether that be from, Tony Robbins, and I can go back to Jim Rohn. I love watching Jim Rohn videos almost every single day. There's so much that we can learn from the greats of the past. But it's one thing to watch it, but Weldon said it's another thing to put it into action, and then to become consistent with it and become disciplined with it. These are things that will transform your life.
Incredible. So powerful. And once again, huge shout out. Thank you to Weldon Long. Definitely go grab a copy of The Power of Consistency and the sales book to go along with that. These are resources that are incredibly, incredibly helpful, because mindset and skill set together create incredible results. But you don't get skill set itself without the mindset. You're not going to get very far. So this has been a phenomenal conversation. Larry, I'm excited. Happy birthday again. 5 years coming up. Selling from the Heart celebration on September 19th. Check social feeds for ways you can help celebrate and join in on the party. We've got an incredible roster of guests coming up throughout the fall. So make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you to everybody who is leaving a review on the platform on which you listen. Larry, I am so excited about all that's ahead. This is so much fun, and just so grateful for the community that is gathering around this movement of authenticity right here in the sales profession.
No, we appreciate you. Stick with us. There's more great stuff around the corner as we head into the fall and into the winter. We're just going to keep bringing what we believe is game changer in sales. And that's trust, authenticity, heart, just being sincere. Here it's Selling from the Heart. We just
that's
call it
right.
a rip.
And until next time, keep being genuine, keep being authentic, keep building trust, embrace the power of consistency, and most of all,
sell from the heart.